Good afternoon, TransCon. Welcome to the Associated Contractor of New Mexico segment this afternoon. My name is Brian Ligon. I'm the Director of Training and Safety for ACNM. And I want to introduce our Track 1 today, our Planning, Design, and Construction panel. We have several of our contractors are going to ask questions of the New Mexico Department of Transportation, and we've got some of our DOT folks that are going to respond. We've had a lot of fun interacting this way with Zoom and recording these different sessions. So we've got quite a range of questions posed by industry, from earthwork to concrete, to design. So it really does fit our title very well. So enjoy the next hour or so of questions and answers from Associated Contractors representatives and New Mexico DOT representatives. I'd like to introduce Michael Sandoval, Cabinet Secretary for New Mexico Department of Transportation.
Thank you, and welcome to everybody at the Trans Conference for 2021. I know last year we didn't get together or even have a conference, and this year, of course, we have to do it virtually. So I'm glad everyone was able to get on and at least participate in this very important, probably one of the most important local conferences we have when it comes to relationship building and partnerships. And I want to just say that our relationship with the Associated Contractors of New Mexico has never been better. We really appreciate all the communication that's happened, and our working relationship has really helped promote construction and the projects in New Mexico. So I'm very happy to participate in this, to see all of you, and hopefully you will enjoy today's venue.
Thank you, Michael. I've got Jim Garcia, Associated Contractors of New Mexico Executive Director.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Secretary. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the TransCon conference. This is a unique and very interesting conference here in New Mexico, and Associated Contractors of New Mexico are very proud to be a part of this, to be helping to sponsor this. Secretary, very gracious events that we had here in the state legislature in the last 2 months. And I just want to say thank you for all that you did. We have a great partnership with the DOT and your team. I really appreciate all the extra hours and effort that you all put into that. And it looks like we're going to have a great year this next year as well. So with that, Mr. Secretary, thank you for playing a big role in what we do here in building New Mexico roads. Thank you.
Very good, guys. We're going to have a great hour of questions and answers right now with the contracting community and New Mexico Department of Transportation. So sit back and enjoy the next hour. Thanks, guys.
My name is Richard Montoya. I'm with F&F Construction. My title is project sponsor, overseeing New Mexico operations.
I'm Armando Armendariz. I'm the State Materials Director working with the DOT.
Good, excellent. And as part of TransCon, we're going to do a question and answer. And Richard, you submitted a question. Can you go ahead and say what your question is, please?
First of all, Armando, Brian, thanks for joining me on this. And just a question that we've had come up on projects for F&F ourselves. I'm not sure who else has come across this, but my question was, NMDOT inspectors fill concrete trucks on mixed properties, but while the load still has the time is still within the time constraints, the load is rejected. What can be done to improve the specification or awareness for the inspector so that concrete loads aren't prematurely rejected with still the allotted time in the specifications?
So I appreciate it too that Brian, you and Richard are doing this. Richard was kind enough to share the question before, and my assumption is Richard's talking about for concrete properties, slump, air, or unit weight, not something other. And so obviously a concrete truck has so much time from when it leaves the batch plant to when it needs to to be emptied. And if I can understand Richard's question correctly, it seems that one of those properties, I'm just going to pick slump. Slump is an inch out, and the inspector says, okay, it doesn't meet, and there's still time. I think Richard's point is maybe they could do something to that, spinning the truck or whatever, and then still use that truck instead of returning that material or wasting that material or not getting able to use it. And so there's a lot of factors. And the short answer I gave Richard was, I think in some emails back and forth was, I think primarily it's going to be some sort of education. Going to have to be some education for the inspectors and with the contracting community, suppliers and whatnot. You know, suppliers have a job to give Richard as the prime good material, and they can test that material through a QC program before it leaves the plant and know if that slump is good or bad. And the inspectors need to allow Richard or his team, the supplier as well, ample opportunity to retest that material and see if it's good or can be salvaged. That causes a lot of stress sometimes in the field for an inspector who's trying to worry about testing the mix and monitoring the rate of pour or whatever it is. And so those challenges happen. But ultimately, I think it goes down to some education and some communication. Some of the ideas I shared with Richard in the email exchange were talking about how to do that at a pre-con. Talking about how to do that at a pre-deck or pre-placement.
Yeah.
Sharing, hey, if this happens, what are we going to do? What are our steps? You know, we don't want it to happen, obviously, for every truck because then something's just not going right. But when it happens every now and then, that's something that should be accommodated and a teamwork, if you will, in this case, to address that. I guess I would ask. I would have a question for Richard. I know you're not a concrete mixer, so maybe what's the genesis of this request? It's happened a few times, or suppliers have voiced their concern to you that, hey, we're wasting a lot of concrete, or what's going on?
Well, it goes a little bit both ways. We do get the suppliers, you know, obviously losing material nobody wants, and I don't think material is made bad on purpose. Stuff happens, you know. It could be the driver leaves the water on when he's supposed to add a couple gallons to get it, or let's be fair, right? Us contractors will go over there and the guys want to, hey, add 5 gallons of water and somebody forgets it. It happens, and that stuff is, you know, blatant. If it's just soup and we're doing slip form, yeah, let's get it out. But I think what it comes down to is I've been on jobs where it's out air, you know, air is a little high. I'm still within the allotted time. We test it once, okay, that's when we find out. The second time it's still out, but then it's too quick to be, oh, send it out when I still got some time. I mean, if I have a batch plant, we'll take Albuquerque, for example, that's close by. My time, which is great because I have more time than I was, you know, an hour away, then now it's critical to get that truck in and out as fast as I can. So I think it's just really premature to reject the truck if it goes out quickly on the first 2 tests and we still got time, because it costs everybody money. The suppliers lose a load, you know, the contractors have crews standing around, the inspectors are there, you know, inspecting, not being productive as well. And then I think overall it causes the public perception of, geez, they're still in the same spot. What's going on? I mean, and we work for the public and we want to show progress because, quite frankly, that's how we get measured by us as a contracting side and as the department, as the agency, is we all get measured by the rate of progress. Whether they know it's good, bad, indifferent, that's our measuring stick.
What's the ballpark price of a load of concrete? 10 yards of concrete. What would that be? $1,000? $1,200?
You're looking probably $1,400.
Okay. All right.
So
I think there has to be some effort though. It's not just a test and a retest. There's got to be something done to address it's out of air or it's out of unit weight or it's high on slump or low on slump or something. There's got to be some, okay, you've got 30 minutes left on this load because it's so close from Albuquerque, and you put that truck off to the side. You still make your rate of pour, you still do the things that you have to do, but there has to be something between the contractor and the supplier to address that truck, whether it be mixing it or letting it sit, or if it's low on air, doing an air additive if it's approved in the mix design.
Yeah.
There are things that have to be done. It's not just, well, let's test it and let's just retest it to see if the second test is better.
no,
And I
yeah,
don't think that's what you're talking about. I think
No.
there's time for you to still do practices, standard practices to the material to help it succeed.
right. And that's, I think I could speak for ourselves as F&F, but I'm sure every contractor does that and not just turn around to a supplier and say, hey buddy, I don't know what you're gonna do. I mean, we're always trying to troubleshoot. I mean, hey, back in the past days or past years, we had this similar thing. Maybe add a little bit of air and maybe just a little bit of water, or maybe just add water to get that air rejuvenated again and up. So I know we do that a lot as contractors. Like I said, is try and save the load, and it's not just, well, the tester did it wrong. I mean, too many times I think we all get in that mindset where it's us against you, and in reality we're all on the same team, and getting that relationship established with the testers and suppliers and primes is, hey, let's work together to figure this out so that way we can move along.
Good deal. I liked Armando's comment about communication, the pre-con, the pre-deck placement communication, all that's very positive. So,
Well, you have to do that at that time to see if you can add air, because if the mix design doesn't allow you to use additives or things of that nature, then you don't want to do something on the job site that's going to now mess things up worse. And so those are the discussions. I think that, hey, if it's low on air, can we add air? Is the mix design approved for that? Can we do other things to it? So
good.
I think those discussions beforehand help give parameters or out of bounds, if you will. And as long as you stay within those parameters, you're good. But I think it's going to come to some communication and education of there's a time limit.
Thanks, guys. Great question, great answer, and good back and forth. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
All
Thank you,
right.
Armando. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Good morning or afternoon. My name is Neil Jackson, estimator project manager with Mountain States Constructors. So Armando / NMDOT representative. My question has to do with section 203, excavation, embankment and borrow. And it's based on situations we've had, and I believe other contractors and NMDOT personnel have had in the past, trying to, I guess, understand borrow and its payment. But I'll just read my question here. We believe there is conflicting language earlier in the specification, which states that borrow should come from off-site. And in addition, there is discussion about the timing as to when borrow can be handled. And this is all in section 203.2.1.3. However, the method of measurement calculation doesn't really care where the borrow comes from. It doesn't state or doesn't matter where it comes from or when the contractor has to start hauling that borrow. It is only a measurement of the difference in survey surfaces to generate a cut and fill volume. From these values, borrow is calculated or waste. This language has caused confusion on projects because it intermingles what the DOT is calling a neat line quantity, which takes out the shrinkage or fluff per se. It takes that out of the calculation as it's defined in the method of measurement section. However, it intermingles the old specification where borrow is paid for out of a borrow pit, cross-sectioned out of an offsite location. So I guess the ultimate issue is we've got conflicting language, and ultimately, does borrow, or does the language of borrow need to say comes from an offsite location? And also, does the language about the timing when borrow can take place on a project, does that matter based on method of measurement and payment? Good luck understanding that one.
As Brian and Neil and I were talking about this before we started recording, we had to do some research. So Neil and I have a few conversations about this topic because it's pretty in depth. What I would offer up is there's not an easy yes or no answer for this. There's some challenges that are presented with earthwork. And we've talked about it in our offline conversations. I think that there are areas of the spec that are crystal clear, and I think that there are areas that Neil is pointing out where there's an improvement, and there's always that ability in any contract to make those improvements. One of the areas that I feel is clear when it comes to borrow is that the contractor is supposed to notify the project manager, hey, we're going to go get some borrow, and we're going to go get it from this offsite location. I'm taking a guess here, or from my conversations with other individuals around the DOT. The point of that is to trigger, do we have a PID agreement? Do we have a reclamation plan? Do we have all these things that are needed before we go start hauling borrow off-site? And so that seems to me to be pretty clear and spelled out in steps. Neil is right that method of measurement just says, hey, we want to know what the delta is. If this was the original ground surface and we put more, then what's that amount, and that should be paid for borrow. Earthwork's hard. It's hard for the DOT to track. And I don't know how hard it is. I can't speak for it from the contractor side, but in all the examples that we talk about, it's pretty minimalized. We take a yard of dirt from station 1 and we move that yard of dirt to station 3, and that's unclassified excavation. We don't have any dirt to take from station 1, but we need dirt at station 3, and we tell the project manager we're going to go off-site to the Ligon pit and bring in a yard of dirt, and that's simple for us to calculate there. Where it gets complicated, in particular to Neil's question, which he really didn't touch on, was regard to removal of surfacing. Removal of surfacing is paid for under one item, but if you want to take that, the DOT has moved removal of surfacing to the contractor to say, put it in the wrap, put it in the base course, and Neil's question, to his point, put it in the borrow, or put it in the embankment. And the only answer that I could come up with Neil in doing so is that we should clarify that pre-bid, because it needs to be given to the contractors to know, can I take this surfacing and mix it into the embankment pre-bid, affecting my bids with that knowledge, instead of asking someone after the fact, can I do this? And they say yes or possibly no for whatever reasons, and that should have been shared. So I think there's a lot of work that can always be done to the spec. I think in this case, there's a team that we need to engage, and the unfortunate situation that currently exists is the team is no longer with us. Michelle Mann has left. I think Emiliano Martinez was a key member of that committee. And so yeah, we need to get around the table again, or virtually, and address some of these concerns.
Armando, I appreciate that answer, and I apologize for not bringing up the removal surfacing, because that was kind of where I was headed, as I know I've had discussions with project managers from NMDOT project managers and staff regarding that in the past. And I know you mentioned that a special provision probably needs to be, or a notice to contractors probably needs to be dealt with on this. I did put together, I guess, a little bit of a screen share here to maybe illustrate my point a little bit more. So, Brian, I'll go ahead and share this. And I know we've kind of discussed all this already, but just to illustrate, I wanted to, I guess, for people that might not fully understand my issue, kind of illustrate that a little bit more.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and my screen here. I just want to make sure that you guys can see this here. What can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So what we're looking at here is actually the cross sections from a project in District 1, which is very well done. I didn't have to highlight any of this. It was already highlighted by the designer, so it was nice. And what we're looking at here is an existing off ramp on I-10, where this is the existing ramp. It's actually two pavement surfaces here, where you can notice that their existing ground surface has removed the existing surfacing, as they should have, because we have removal of surfacing as a pay item. And green being the fill or embankment areas for the new ramp location. So the concern that we have is going to the spec. You can see that early in the spec, Borrow states that borrow shall consist of contractor provided suitable embankment obtained from an approved source outside the right of way. Okay, that's early in the spec. The next discussion on borrow is contractor shall exhaust all available suitable material from unclassified excavation operations prior to utilizing the borrow source. My question is why, and I'll get to that. Finally is the measurement and payment section. Method of measurement, and the blue section here, earthwork quantities will be calculated as a neat volume from the original ground surface, less the existing roadway surfacing, between the limits shown on the plans and or authorized changes by the project manager and the new ground surface. That's it. Out of this comes these items here, with the exception of rock excavation, which is done differently. But I guess where I'm headed with all that is, on a project, you develop existing cross sections and final cross sections, and ultimately develop an earthwork report that looks like this, whether it be for your all's calculation and design, or at the end, how we get paid. So at the end of this, we get values where you have a cumulative cut and a cumulative fill. The net result of that is either a negative, which is borrow, or a positive, which is waste. My concern in all of this as it relates to removal of surfacing is, if I use removal of surfacing in the embankment, how is that quantified in here? It doesn't care if this little bit of material right here and right here gets dumped into here. There's no way to calculate that out of it. And to me, the easiest simple solution would be for the department to determine whether they want to pay neat line quantities or go back to the old spec and pay out of a borrow. There is no kind of in between there. You have to do one or the other. And so with that,
Put your screen back up,
okay,
because it'll help.
Sure.
Please, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So everything on the left there in red, minus the roadway surfacing, is taken and it's moved over to the green.
Yes, sir.
And so that's that for what Neil and I had talked about before was that's unclassified excavation. And so you took it from one side of the right of way and you moved it to the other. And so for the sake of today's discussion or argument, we're just going to say 100 yards went over to 100 yards. That's paid as unclassified excavation. So we're also now going to change that. That's a simple one. We can agree on that. Now we're going to change it and we're going to say that the red is 100 yards and the green is 150. And in this soil is so great, it doesn't have any shrink or swell or anything, but the 50 yards is going to be the existing surfacing. So what's going to happen is we're going to cut 100 yards of red and we're going to put it on the other side in the green. And then when we put the existing surfacing in there, it actually makes it whole to 150. And this is the argument or the concern that Neil and I are having here, the discussion of that 100 yards should be paid as unclassified X and 50 yards should be paid as borrowed. But the spec doesn't read that way to say that that's what'll happen. It does for the payment where Neil's concern is, but there are earlier areas that didn't get followed. So if we can go to the second part that Neil showed, the spec, it says that they would have to notify the contractor, would have to notify the DOT, the other one, Neil, I don't know if I can touch it. The first one, I can touch it, I guess.
This one has the contractor shall notify the project manager in writing. Is that what you're after?
Yes, and so it says, hey, we're out. So we took the 100 yards in red and we moved it over here. Now we have to tell them, well, we're going to take the unclassified or the removal of surfacing and mix it in to make the 150. The problem is, and that's what I said, and I think, I hope Neil agrees, is that we have to inform all contractors pre-bid that this is acceptable. Because right now it says you have to go to an offsite source. So my argument to Neil was, we'll take all the surfacing and drive to the BOP and bring it out and do a U-turn and come back, and then you're okay. That's asinine. We're not going to do that, but we can recognize that there's an issue here. The greater issue I had with Neil was, what if you assume that it's okay to move the surfacing or mix the surfacing in with the soil, and for some unknown reason, environmentally or cultural resource wise, or some commitment that the DOT made to nearby landowners, we wouldn't do that. And then Neil gets told, no, you can't do that. And now he's in a pickle because he bid it a certain way and he's got to go find borrow. And so that's why I said, I think we need to make an adjustment and say, look, if we're doing such an extensive project, you should be able to take the removal of surfacing and mix it in there. We should be able to get the value of that. That's the answer to Neil's question as to why the department wants to use the dirt that's available on the job first before going out and purchasing some. And so again, there's no short, easy answer, but I think there's a lot that has to be done. And there are team members that are missing. I think Neil was a member of that Division 200 team. And we need to get around the table again and make some modifications to improve this for the state and for the bidders, and that makes it even keel for everybody.
I appreciate that response and totally agree with it about the need to kind of clarify some of that stuff. I apologize though. I understood. If you don't mind, I'd like to go back a little bit. I understood the reasoning for notifying the department prior to utilizing borrow in terms of making sure that environmental clearances are met. Was there another reason that you had stated in there? I'm sorry.
Maybe we made a commitment. I said maybe we made a commitment to adjoining. Maybe that section there by the off ramp is next to businesses and they wanted to do landscaping. But we could address those things by saying anything you mix with the removal of surfacing, put that in the bottom of that fill area. It's obviously going to be there because you're going to take that off first and then put it at the bottom of the fill area. But we could make those discussions or have those discussions prior to, and maybe we would satisfy a nearby business who said, hey, we want that landscaping to take there or something. I don't know what the reasons could be. Each project is unique. But I did also want to point out, I don't know who the consultant or who the PDE was that did that color coordination, and I have to confirm with Neil. That's a very good job. And so I don't know, Neil, do you know who did it out of South Region there somewhere, or what consultant did it?
Yeah, I believe, I think it was done in-house. I think District 1 did it, so I'm sure Sherry Holyfield was involved in it. I think her name's somewhere on there. I don't know if she specifically did this process.
I kind of figured Sherry would be one to do that. I think that's a heck of a job there. And so kudos
Absolutely. They
to
did a
Sherry,
great
or if we have the wrong individual, we're sorry, but yeah, kudos for making it that way. That's an excellent way to put it for the contractors to see and for everybody to see.
Yeah, it was visually very, very good to see, and we do appreciate things like that. One backing up one more thing, is I know we're probably running out of time a little bit, but I believe if I remember my discussions with the past committee, one reason for their concern in making sure that we're requesting borrow was to make sure that all of the unclassified excavation was completed prior to performing borrow operations. And
in that phase.
In that phase.
Sorry, in that phase, yes, that's correct.
Correct. And I guess I disagree with that comment for one reason. And I'm going to go back to my screen a little bit. And the reason I disagree with that is the calculation, once again, doesn't care when we do what operation in earthwork. If I took an example here, and let's say I took all this material in the red, cut it out and hauled it all off, and I brought in all this green as theoretically defined as borrow from an offsite location. You guys, the DOT, would not pay me all that as borrow, because this is a neat line calculation. But I could, if it works for me, let's say it's cheaper for me, which it's not, but for giggles, let's say it's cheaper for me to take this material and haul it off and bring borrow in to make this fill. You guys are not going to pay me as borrow. But theoretically, I could do that. And as a neat line calculation, I'm still going to get paid 100 cubic yards of cut and only 50 cubic yards of borrow in this situation where you have 100 cubic yards of cut and 150 cubic yards of fill. So it doesn't, or let me backpedal a little bit, or I could bring in borrow first. I could bring in 150 cubic yards right now before I've even taken an ounce of this dirt and remove all this dirt and haul it to waste. I could do that, but you're not going to pay me 150 cubic yards of borrow. So the timing on this, to me, based on the way you guys are requiring us to be paid, which I am totally fine with, we just got to clean up the language. It doesn't matter when I do my borrow operations at all.
So there's a lot there, Neil. Okay, so first of all, we have to agree that whatever that red material is unsuitable. And so if that red material is completely unsuitable, then
I say it's not. Let's say it's totally suitable.
Okay, so in a traffic control phasing, then we would say use the suitable material first. So use the red. So
what if I don't want to?
I'm sorry?
What if I don't want to?
Well, that's okay. We gave a suggested sequence of construction, and we said this suggested sequence of construction says to do the red first and then move it over to the green. Now we proved that it was constructible, and now for some reason you say, hey, it's not going to go that way, and you propose a change in the suggested sequence where the green now is you're going to bring in borrow first and have waste. That is something that at the district level and the project management level that they have to review for those suggested sequence of construction changes. and recognize that this could have a significant impact on earthwork operations, and the change order could be bigger, because technically we said first use the red and move it to the green. For whatever reason, you change the sequence and you have a better sequence to build things, and it requires you to put the green first and then waste the red. That's borrow. The green should be borrow, and you wasted all the red. It's what's available in that phase, and that would be within spec. And the district and the project office and the construction engineer have to be well aware that that's going to cause a significant change order when they approve that change in sequence. Because the PDE calculated moving the red to the green as unclassified X with minimal 50 yards of borrow, like we talked about. So
I agree.
this is why earthwork is very challenging. It's very challenging in the districts, and to make a joke about it, we've got 9 ways to do earthwork when we should really have one. So
no, absolutely,
it's a challenging area.
It is, and I think it can be simplified a little bit. I just want to clarify your comment a little there. If you guys, the designers, state that material is good and I can put it in there, and I agree with that, okay, and sequence of construction, let's say that could totally happen. But for whatever reason, let's say I've got a borrow pit right off the edge of the green right here. Let's say
You don't have it there. You've got it to the right.
No,
You've got it to
let's-
the right of that line.
Let's say my right-of-way line is right here.
Okay, well,
Okay.
we got a problem. Move it over to the right.
And I've
'cause
got
now
a
we got
borrow
Toa
pit.
slope outside the right of way. So move
And
that line over to the right. We're not going to have it.
there you go, right there.
Okay.
So let's say I've got a borrow pit right here, and it's
Okay.
cheaper. Let's say it's cheaper for me to haul this material off and pick up this dirt and put it right here.
Okay.
Once again,
I'm going to say you need an access break and you need permission from us to break that line. And get in
forget
there.
all that.
I know,
Forget all
no, I
that.
know. I can play
We're
the same
talking
game with you.
calculations.
We
The
got to
department-
talk about this.
The department on a neat line calculation, as defined in your specs, is still going to pay me this cut minus this fill. It will be no cost difference to you guys, but theoretically you would see, my unit price is my unit price because that's how I did the project. This is the advantage to a neat line calculation. It is 100% up to the contractor how they do their work. You guys, the DOT, should not care how we make this embankment, provided the materials are acceptable, because ultimately the calculation comes out the same whether this material goes here or this material goes off and this material comes here. I get paid the exact same way. So anyway,
So hold on then, Neil. So then how do you get paid for it? Does unclassified excavation go away?
no, sir.
Okay,
My
so
unclassified
then
excavation,
are you going to get paid to remove that red as unclassified excavation and paid to put the green in?
my unclassified excavation, whether I use this material to make that embankment or haul it off, is still the red minus the green. That's it.
And if there's a delta of that 50 yards, then you get 100 yards of unclassified excavation and 50 yards of borrow.
Absolutely. No matter how I move that dirt, I could haul all of that red off and all quote unquote borrow in, but it's not borrow. My unclassified excavation by the calculation is the red minus the green, and the net result of that is either a negative or a positive, being borrow or waste. It doesn't matter where I get that material whatsoever.
Well, the department does have concerns if you get it off site. We want to be able, because we have federal requirements that we're going to have to be concerned with. And so borrow pits for us are a big deal. Even if it's a BLM, we've had case history where there's been BLM pits that have been an issue. And so a borrow pit for us is a big deal for reseeding and reclamation.
Understood, and that is, in my opinion, is dealt with in Division 100.
Yeah, it is.
But anyway, I think
I don't think we're going to solve it here today for the TransCon conference, but I think Les, we could agree on this, is that the team does have to sit down and examine the roadway removal of surfacing, how that would be used, how you would use just going right outside the right of way and putting it in. I know you mentioned that there was another agency, well, I don't know if it was Federal Lands, does it simply just whatever the delta is, and that's that.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Federal highway.
Maybe looking at that spec in comparison to ours, and making sure that you get buy-in from the 6 district ADEs of construction, I think is going to be a big deal.
Yes, sir.
To create consistency anyway, so that it's treated the same for projects.
I agree. I think this can be uncomplicated if we sit down and talk about it and try to get everybody to understand the situation. And I do appreciate your time, and thank you for having that conversation with me.
I appreciate your time too, and obviously having it with me all to prepare for this. There was a lot of looking at specs and double checking things, and earthworks interesting. It's a challenge, and so for those project managers who need help or whatever, we should be willing to listen and understand both sides of the conversation to make it better. That's ultimately the goal.
Thanks, guys. Great question, great interaction. So thank you.
My name is Sam Stribling. I'm with 814 Solutions. We specialize in erosion and sediment control.
My name is William Hutchinson. I'm the landscape architect for the New Mexico Department of Transportation. I'm the manager of the roadside environment design section.
I am John Busmeyer. I'm the landscape and revegetation specialist with DOT, and I work in Bill's group.
So the question that I've got is specific to materials that are specified inside the specs, and if we can broaden the scope of what's included in there or what's allowed for projects. Simply because we've come across a few projects pretty recently that have had some issues with availability. Specific compost and straw are the primary ones. And if we have some time, I'd like to also just discuss blankets and that as an alternative mulch cover.
Good.
John, I'll take the first shot at this, and then you could augment with that. Yeah, we are interested in working with industry to broaden out materials, and we are open to substitutes as long as they demonstrate equivalent effectiveness. So as an example, the DOT is willing now to accept wheat straw as a substitute for barley straw, because we understand almost entirely imported these days, and there's a lot of competition with fire revegetation with the Forest Service bear teams and all that. So we need to show that whatever the other material is, that it has equivalent effectiveness, as I mentioned. So I'm going to let John address the testing program that we are involved in, and we welcome proposals from the contracting community to test alternative projects. And John, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think the idea is that we will test a variety of products, almost anything that comes our way that's safe and we think will be effective in the long term. And then we're just going to follow that up with some monitoring to determine effectiveness. And the goal is to have it as transparent and objective as possible and be able to repeat the results in the field. We'll have photo evidence of everything that we do, so that even somebody sitting at home can kind of repeat the process on their computer and see where we got the results from.
Neat.
Okay. Would you guys be willing to have any additions of mulch covers that are hydraulically applied for areas? I mean, that are not just steep slope or Class C seating?
We have tried those in the past, and at one point we did have some language in there, particularly for crimped straw in urban areas, which I think, as we both know, tended to be kind of a mess and blew all around, and there were community objections to it. Our problem with it that we've seen in the past is it tended to form a little bit of a barrier to germinating seed to get through. And and maybe that were just those applications. Yes, you know that there's many different kinds of hydraulically applied ones, and the rate of application is key to this. So we are, I think, open to that, but again, we want to see the effectiveness of it. In my experience, having crimped straws work well because they break up the tendency of the soil to crust, and hydraulically applied ones don't do, but hydraulic has got its advantages, ease of application, and as I mentioned, the kind of tidiness of it. So I would say, yes, we are open to that, but we want to be able to, as John mentioned, test these things and establish the evaluation criteria for it before we head into it.
Okay. Good deal. Well, the other one is, I guess, is material that I'd like to see if you guys could give me some more information on is the compost, because we did have a facility down south that's privately owned, and you know that gives some challenges as far as having enough material available for projects that, you know, they could be 2 years out before we have the opportunity to get out there and do the work. Would you guys be willing to consider some type of alternative products other than the city of Albuquerque compost in situations where there's not availability in locations like that?
I mean, in principle, yes, although the reality of it is a challenge. And we support the recycling effort the department does on many different levels, not just with compost. So there is an added value to supporting municipal green waste facilities. We understand there's some challenges in working with it. We have tried to get other vendors in the game. The city of Santa Fe has gone in and out in terms of being in the program. We've tried to get the city of Las Cruces involved. So I think if we were providing the equivalent amount of organic matter in the soil, and I think you alluded to that before, then I think we would be open to that kind of thing. The challenge has been to meet that threshold. We believe that the compost has got a long-term benefit to improving the soil. The amount of the water holding capacity of the soil is what we're aiming for. As you know, we're in an arid state, becoming more arid apparently by the year. And so anything we could do to give these grasses and forbs a bounce at the beginning helps us. Our goals are for long-term sustainability of our roadside. We do have a stewardship responsibility. So even though the short term is to meet, you know, the U.S. Clean Water Act in terms of plant cover or the construction general permit, we're also interested in creating an ecologically diverse roadside environment and not just focused on quick cover. So that may be a little bit of difference as in terms of what the impetus is for many revegetation projects, which is to get cover and get out. And I appreciate that. But the department is also interested in the ecological health of our roadside. We have 200,000 acres of roadside environment stretching from Chihuahuan Desert to alpine areas. And most of it is natural, but we do have this managed zone or disturbed area. We have something approaching 700 or 800 acres a year that we revegetate through the program that you're in, and then probably an equivalent amount that is damaged through maintenance activities that we're looking at revegetating. So we're trying to take a big picture towards it and balance those long-term needs with, folks such as yourself who are on the front line of trying to, put it back together again. But to make long story short, Sam, we are interested in other products and we're happy to test them and open, transparent testing. If they work, then we'll add them to the spec.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it gives me lots of ideas about some things that we could try considering out there, like a biotic soil media that maybe has some higher organic matter that you guys want to see, or some humates, maybe something like that. But that's probably going to be in that testing program that you guys are referencing, that we could do something like that.
Yes.
Okay. The other material that I was kind of hoping we could consider for a variety of reasons. One is as an alternative cover to simply just a rock mulch. but also is something that would give us an alternative product to use when we've got limitations on access to the site, or if it's a real narrow working area, just making sure that we're getting something that's the best option would be a blanket or rolled erosion control products.
Mhm. Yeah, the department has a long history with that. And I wouldn't say I'm very fond of them. We have used them here and there. And I found, I would say in 9 times out of 10, what I observed in my experience was that I were continuing to get erosion underneath them. And so we discontinued the use of them. They have been used here or there in other settings. One of them, a project in Albuquerque. And so we are going to be monitoring that one. There was another project done in Canyoncito where they were used recently, and there's been pretty severe erosion up there. Actually, I have some photo documentation of that. So I don't, there has been an explosion in the last few years of those products available, some of them quite sophisticated. So I don't want to impugn all blankets. I think they may have their place. I believe personally that place is at higher elevations where we get over 20 inches of moisture a year. And this is certainly where CDOT, Colorado DOT seems to use things like that, jute netting and the like. So we're open to it, and we'll definitely integrate that into the testing program. We can find locations for it. Okay. And then I think that's the fairest thing to do, is to have those kind of tests and we can evaluate them. And we partner with industry in terms of proposing ideas and see what works.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate your guys's viewpoint that it needs to be something that has to be done to get good results from revegetation's perspective, which is important, certainly. So that's why we're all trying to do this. But also it does give us an alternative product to provide mulch cover on seeded areas for areas that are they're very difficult to get equipment in there to put rock down or something like that. So I would really appreciate if we could find something else that we could look at. And I look forward to maybe looking at blanket as an alternative mulch cover in that other program for testing that you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the things that we deal with is that those are typically used on steeper slope situations. And as you and I know, water tends to run off those things very quickly. And what rock mulch does is tend to slow it down. Well, both products tend to do, but rock mulch is basically there forever unless it sloughs. And you can see many places in this state where there were steep slope cuts done and nothing done. And you get this kind of rilling, and then our maintenance has to come in over decades and just scoop up the soil down at the bottom. I mean, I-25 is classic going south of Socorro. You see all those cuts. Had those had rock mulch on them, we would get far less of that kind of sloughing of soil, and it reduces our maintenance costs. So we have to take kind of a longer view of the effectiveness of some of these things. I'm not saying that blankets don't have their place, but I think we need to be very careful about where we use them.
My name's Rod Billingsley. I'm president of Billingsley Engineering. We do construction engineering and construction surveying.
My name is David Quintana. I'm chief engineer with NMDOT.
David, my first question is on department projects which require modified or new drainage structures. The contractor is required to provide a revised structure list, which includes plots of the existing ground surface, the proposed finished surface, and the placement, orientation, length, and inlet and outlet grades. In many cases, there are significant changes required to address field and design conditions. The specifications require that this work be done by a professional surveyor. If this submittal is approved by the department and subsequently proves to be inadequate, who is responsible for the cost of correction? And then what if the 1 foot minimum cover is provided and failure still occurs?
All right, Rod, thank you for that question. Appreciate it. As you're well aware, we do require revised structure lists on all of our projects. and they're to be done by a professional surveyor. I feel that the DOT does review those structure lists, but they do not take on the responsibility of accuracy that the surveyor of record is responsible for. So if they are approved by the department and subsequently proved to be inadequate, then the person that actually did the survey would be responsible for the cost of correction as far as the way we look at it. As far as the 1 foot minimum cover, that really is, we request that the contractor protect the structures during construction. The 1 foot minimum cover is more a post-construction detail that if that is provided, normal everyday traffic shouldn't damage that structure. However, we know that construction equipment and earthwork could potentially disturb the structure that has a 1 foot cover. So again, the specs, I think they do require that the contractor make take the precaution to protect those structures in place. So I would say, again, if there's a failure that occurs, that 1 foot cover is really specifically for final when it's open to traffic and we have that 1 foot cover and standard traffic goes over it, that's adequate. But for construction equipment, it's not, and that's why we put the onus on the constructor to protect those structures in place during construction. So I hope that answers your questions, Rod.
Okay, thank you, David. On bridge projects, the specifications require the contractor to provide a lateral bracing system for the superstructure during deck placement. The design must be done by a professional engineer and drawings and calculations submitted for department approval. If this approval is given and the system fails, who is responsible for the cost of the correction?
All right, again, thanks, Rod, for that. I appreciate the question. Again, I'll kind of fall back on my previous answer with regard to the engineer in responsible charge who stamped those, the bracing plans would be, they would be responsible for any cost of correction. Just our review of, again, the department's review of those submittals does not take away the liability and responsibility of the engineer of record in this case. Now, I know that some other states have standard designs for some of these bracing systems, and I'll ask our bridge engineer to take a look and do some research on that, on what other states are doing, and see if we can't come up with some standards that could be used by industry to help with some of that, and hopefully address some of those concerns.
Thank you, David. In the above situations, do you think design responsibility is clearly defined in the specifications?
Thanks for that question, Rod. I do appreciate it. Yes, I think it's defined, but I really do think where the design responsibility is more clearly defined is going to be when you go into the NMAC and the Professional Engineer and Surveyors Act. The responsibility of the engineer of record is clearly defined in my mind's eye in that. Our specifications do, I feel, address any responsibility that needs to be done in the field for the design work you specified above, the structure, revised structure lists and any temporary shoring that needs to be done. However, again, just to hopefully augment that, we'll see what kind of standards we might be able to implement with some of our shoring that we're requiring. And with regard to revised structure lists, if it is worth the time for the contractor to go through the RFI process on that when there are major significant changes, that would be ideal. That way our engineers know, our designers know what some of the concerns are out in the field that we're seeing, and we can do a better job in our plan sets. Now I understand though that, sometimes that's just not a good return on their investment to go after that process, and just, they want to address it through the revised structure list. So that's something that the contractors, I feel, that's a business decision that they've made. And if they continue to do that, then, you know, there is a process for them to go through the RFIs if they need to get better design or better understanding of the intent of the design. But again, it's the contractor's responsibility to do that request. So I'll leave it, I'll fall back on ultimately what they feel is in their best interest for keeping the project on schedule and getting a return on their investment.
Thank you, David.
Very
Thank
good,
you.
guys. Thank you for your time today.
I appreciate it.
That wraps up our session this afternoon. We thank TransCon 2021 for having this format. We are very pleased, Associated Contractors of New Mexico, to be one of the sponsors of this year's TransCon. We will have this video available on our ACNM website at aconm.org, and you can also find us on Facebook. So thank you for your time this afternoon.